Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is our Legends edition, and with Vincent Turner, I'm Harper LeBel, and Jeremiah Long is our producer and engineer. And Vincent, today we're going to talk about a guy who really doesn't need much of an introduction, but we're going to give him one of the most original and unique players to ever cross over into the National Football League. But it didn't start there. He had great success in college. He was obviously a standout in high school. And today we're going to visit and talk a little bit about Ted Hendricks.
Ted Hendricks, man, 6'8". I remember him back in the day as being the tallest football player in the National Football League out of Miami, Florida. Boy, I got some stories. Miami Vice. But when I think about Ted Hendricks, man, I think about his time when he was at Miami making covers of Street and Smith, his game against O.J. Simpson his senior year. Just so much about him. And we talk about great defensive players that's played the outside linebacker and defensive end position. And we talk about Deacon Jones. We're talking about Carl Ella. We talk about Howie Long. We talk about Richard White. We talk about Derek Thomas, Kevin Green. But I'm going to tell you, I didn't realize till this weekend doing my research work on Mr. Hendricks, he was special. He was a playmaker. And him being from Miami, tonight, Phil Collins at the highest level, baby. Back to you, Hawk.
Well, he's a little older than Phil, at least a little bit, but you're right. He was all over the place. He was all over the place, not only on the field, but in different parts of the country that he lived in. And if you're all over the place and you're looking for a place to place a bet, mybookie.ag is a place that you may want to start doing so. Use the promotional code MM50 to get started. You log on, you enter your information, you put a username and a password in, you create an account, you fund the account, and then no matter where you are in the nation, in the world, you can place a bet on NHL, on NBA playoffs that are approaching, Major League Baseball. Tonight is the championship for the NCAA in the Final Four. You can place a bet on either Duke or with Florida, and it's so simple to use. So we would appreciate it if you use that MM50 promo code. You get free chips. You get a lot of features and benefits just by starting out to make it easy for you to be successful. We hope that you do. And no matter what your restrictions are in certain states, get to know what those are, and then you'll be able to place bets if you're on vacation or if you're across the street or across the country. So MM50 for mybookie.ag. We greatly appreciate them being a sponsor of the show. So thank you so very much for that. And getting back to Theodore Paul Hendricks, he was born on November 1st, 1947. And he was born in Guatemala, Vincent. One of the things that's very interesting to me, his father was an airplane mechanic. He worked for Pan Am. He gets stationed down in Guatemala City. He meets a local girl, and they fall in love, and they have a young boy named Theodore, his nickname is Ted, Paul Hendricks, back in November of 1947. So he grows up, and he's got a Spanish influence. He's multilingual. When they move back to Hialeah, Florida, a few years later, Ted can speak multiple languages, and he gets involved with aerospace. He loves NASA. And going into high school, he was a football, basketball, baseball, and track athlete, but he was also a smart kid. He loved school. He loved mathematics. He would figure out these problems in his head sometimes or write them down on paper because he wanted to work for NASA at one point. He just loved the aerospace industry and eventually maybe wanted to be an astronaut or at least help propel those gigantic ships and rockets that would go up into space. That was all something that was in his wheelhouse. Very original guy.
Rhodes Scholar type of material was at Miami and Mr. Ted Hendricks. What I took from him is that he had 4 scholars. He had offers all over the country in 3 sports, baseball, basketball, football. But the guy also had over 50 offers in academics. Math, which was my most terrible subject growing up. And I mean, this cat was a calculus genius. Unbelievable, because I'm going to tell you a true story right quick. Here in Douglasville, Georgia, my former barber, who moved back to Jackson, Mississippi, played football at Jackson State. He was all Southwest Conference in the mid-'70s, Mr. Grady Jameson. Well, he happened to be in the Oakland Raiders camp in 1982 after they won the Super Bowl in 81. And he told me a story that had everybody in the barbershop laughing. He said Ted Hendricks was a clown coming in at another level. Now, check this out before I give it back to you, Harp. He said he came to training camp one day riding on a black horse, dressed up as George Washington. It can't get no better than this. And that first time I asked Grady, I said, how in the world he's able to get on a horse being 6'8"? He said, man, you should have been there. It was something to see. But one thing he told me, pound for pound, playing that outside linebacker position, tough as nails, Ted Hendricks brought that serious smoke. He had your head ringing. Ding, ding, dong. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit. Once he got in the pros, things started changing for him in terms of his success and the folklore that was associated with it. He plays at the University of Miami. He's a homeboy. He wants to stay close to home, even though he had offers to go to other universities. He ends up accepting. Now, here's the thing that's kind of selfless, in my opinion. Yes, Vincent, he was offered scholarships in several different sports. He played baseball, by the way, in high school with Charlie Huff. Charlie was pitching and Ted was playing first base. What a nice little combination those two must have been. To think the amount of years, they're probably 40 some odd years between the two of them in terms of their professional successes. But he takes an academic scholarship and he really begins right away studying physics and honors math. I don't even know how to spell either one of those, right? He's way above everybody else. But by doing so, Vincent, he opens up another scholarship for a different player to play football. That's what I mean by selfless. So he takes advantage of the academic scholarship and he goes to a football team that, remember, you can't play your freshman year. But let's look at some of the numbers while he was there. They were 8-2 back in 1966. That was his sophomore year. And remember, you cannot play your freshman year in the NCAA then. Now, the coaches moved him from tight end. You see the picture in the lower right-hand corner in the white jersey wearing number 89. That's, remember, a white and green for those of you that can see clearly. Miami used the green and a gold color before they went with the orange. But Ted was an offensive player. They switch him over to defense, Vincent. And what a difference that he was able to make on that side of the ball. It really changed everything in his life. They go 8-2-1. They win the Liberty Bowl against Virginia Tech, or at least, VPI was their name back then. And he earns the nickname the Mad Stork. Now, there was the Mad Dog and the Mad Crazy Dude, and they had all kinds of different nicknames, but the Stork kind of fit him. The ibis was the logo and the mascot for Miami. But Ted says, I had the skinniest legs on the team, so everybody kind of teased me a little bit with that one. But he turned it into quite an advantage and a nickname that stuck all throughout the rest of his career.
Three-time All-American at a school like Miami, who at that time wasn't a football powerhouse. I remember so much about his career. I'm going to talk about the All-American teams and think about the players that he made the team with. Alan Page, Bubba Smith, and Jim Lynch in 1966. Then in 1967, Dennis Byrd and Granville Liggins, Boomer Sooner, University of Oklahoma. Then 1968, Jake Scott, Bill Stanfield out of University of Georgia, and Steve Conner out of University of Tennessee. So he was in company of some very serious good football players on the defensive side. But what really, really stuck out to me is how he put Miami football on the map. 1968, coming to his senior year, preseason magazines, the Street and Smith edition. He's on the front cover. Then Sports Illustrated did an article on him and had him on the front cover. The Stork gonna meet the Juice. And we all know who I'm talking about there, the young man out of California, Galileo High School, O.J. Simpson. And they built that game up. And then later in his senior year, they played the University of Florida, last game of the year. They had a very good football player that played with the LA Rams. There was a tailback by the name of Larry Smith. And in that football game, Mr. Hendricks had 4 sacks. So he was on the map as far as being, I want to say, a top first-round NFL type quality football player. But at Miami, 327 career tackles, 139 of them solo, 12 forced fumbles, 12 now. And then in 1967, he caused 7 caused turnovers. In Miami at the time, trust me, they wasn't a juggernaut on no national level as far as football. But when you mention Miami, the U at that time, everybody wanted to talk about that 6'8" phenomenon, Mr. Ted Hendricks. Back to you, Hart.
Yeah, he had a great collegiate career and really proved that he was always around the ball. You know what I mean? He's just always around. And those fumble recoveries or how many he caused, they didn't even keep that stat back in the day. But whether it be deflecting passes or just getting in the lane and making a quarterback want to throw somewhere else. Can you imagine his body with his hands up in the air trying to deflect a pass if he's coming at you as a quarterback? I mean, he's 3 feet taller by the time he raises his hands. So he was a disruptor in many different ways. But you mentioned that 67 was his final year, and that's the year that the Baltimore Colts end up playing the New York Jets in the Super Bowl. And so they lose the game, and a young coach named Don Shula was on the sideline there, and he and Carol Rosenblum, who was the owner, are discussing whether or not they're going to draft this kid out of the University of Miami. And he was still available for their pick in the second round. And they argued over this. And Carol Rosenblum said, nope, he's too skinny. He's not strong enough. He won't be able to go against bigger, heavier offensive line and be able to hold his own. And Shula disagreed with him. They end up making the pick, and what a difference he was able to make. That first team in Baltimore that he was on, they didn't go to the Super Bowl, but that next year they did, and they end up winning it on a late field goal by Jim O'Brien. So very early in Ted's career, he's around success. He's around a team that knows how to win. They've got a great coach. They've got a bunch of fantastic players that are all around it. In fact, most rookies get hazed. There were players on the Baltimore Colt team, Mike Curtis, for example, and a guy named Johnny Unitas, that walk up to him during training camp, and they go and they shake his hand. And they say, welcome to the team. We're glad you're here. Now, Ted had a little joke that he would say. He goes, I think Unitas, the only reason that he was happy is because I was the only guy on the team that had skinnier legs than Johnny did. And so he was relieved of being the skinniest player on the team. But Ted certainly makes a difference, and he's around great football. So collegiately, he had success, although they didn't win a championship. As you mentioned, Vincent, they helped turn the program around. And then obviously his first couple years in the pros, he's a difference maker there.
Think about the Super Bowl team that he was on in 70 early in his career. And you brought up all those great players, but think who he learned from and how he learned how to be a professional. Bubba Smith was on that team. As you say, the great Mike Curtis, Rick Volk on the defensive side of the ball, Jerry Logan, a very good football player. The respect he got from John Mackey, the respect he got from Billy Ray Smith, Roy Jefferson, Earl Morrall. So he was around, I would say, legends. And obviously they took him on to a great career because he learned early, and then he won the Super Bowl. But I'm going to let you take us into the next phase when he became a Raider and played with their silver and black with Al Davis. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, well, real quick, let's talk a little bit about Mike Curtis and the influence that he had. There was a game that Baltimore is playing, and Ted is watching Mike from the other, a little bit, in between the hashes, make a big tackle. And he swings and he does this clothesline, and he just he attacks the helmet of the running back that he's tackling. And they get back in the huddle, and Ted looks over and he goes, Mike, you all right? I think you broke your arm. Mike goes, yeah, I'm fine. You're fine? Yeah. He realized that Mike was wearing those forearm pads, and that allowed him to hit somebody a little bit harder and have no damage to you. And guess what? The very next week and for the rest of his career, Ted always wore forearm pads. You see the picture on the bottom right, his arms are bare. Now, he's skinny as a rail when he's at Miami, but every other picture you'll see him in, including the one there in the bottom left where he's with the Colts, he learned to wrap it up. And you protect yourself. Now, on the Raiders, everybody had forearm pads. Gene Upshaw, Art Shell, those guys, you couldn't have padded them up anymore. It was impossible. But from the wrist, including their hands now, they had gloves on their hands that had pads on it, all the way up to their shoulders. They were covered up. And Ted took advantage of that too. So his success in Baltimore, obviously with the Super Bowl win, they win number 5. They were, oh, and by the way, he also had a $5,000 fine that he had as a rookie. They got on the scale and they said, you better be a certain weight. You had to be at 220. And Carol Rosenblum, who is the owner, tells him to get on the scale. He's in the locker room and tells him, during training camp, I need to see how much you weigh. This is how obsessed that Rosenblum was with his weight. Well, he steps up on the scale and he's 218. And Rosenblum ends up finding him and taking $5,000 out of his contract that Ted would have been making for being too light. So it kind of hurt him, but I think it also awakened him to the fact that there are guys that are out there, that this is a business, and you better learn to take advantage of it rather than let it take advantage of you. So he plays his games out in his contract, and then he goes, Shula leaves. Shula ends up going to the Miami Dolphins, and Ted wants to renegotiate, and the numbers weren't right. And he says, I'm going to go play for the Jacksonville Sharks in the World League. And lo and behold, they didn't want to sign him back, and he ends up being traded and goes to the Green Bay Packers. He spends 1 year there in 1975. And again, this is after Howard Schnellenberger takes over the team in Baltimore. And that 1 year, Dan Devine leaves, and Bart Starr ends up becoming the head coach in Green Bay. So at the end of that year, he goes, hey, Bart, I want a fully guaranteed contract. Now, who would do that, right? The savvy to do that, the business sense to do that, and then obviously the machismo, if you will, the gusto to be able to step in front of your head coach and go, no, I want a different contract, and you're going to do it. Well, Bart wasn't about to give in to that, because that would just be a domino effect. And next thing you know, he's meeting with Al Davis. And even Al Davis had an issue with his weight. Al Davis, John Madden, Ted Hendricks' agent, and Ted himself, they had a little bit of a meeting one day. And this is when he was going out to California to visit to see whether or not he was going to sign with the Raiders. And Al says, I think you're too light. We've got a weight program that we're going to put you on. We're going to get you bigger, stronger, faster. And we're going to add some weight to you and get you to be bulked up a little bit more. And Ted responds, he says, Al, when I grab them, they're grabbed. And Madden ends up telling that story because it was all he needed to hear. And John Madden only had 3 rules. He said, be on time, be alert, and go like hell when I tell you to. Those were his 3 rules. So even though Ted was starting to drink a little bit during that time, he could observe those 3 rules and play like a bandit on Sundays. And what a difference he made for the Raiders.
When you look at his time with the Raiders, and I'm thinking about over that time, the Raiders had a reputation of being dirty, physical, and if you played them in a football game, you was going to feel it. And I just want everybody here at 100 Yards Football, think about all the great players he played with from 76 to 83 until he retired. Dave Casper, Cliff Branch, The Snake, Howie Long, Upshaw, Art Shale, man, Rob Martin, Matt Millen, so many, Matuzak, Lester Hayes, Mike Haynes, Van McElroy, Lyle Alzado, who became a really good friend with him, Todd Christensen. And he played at a high level for 7 years and won 3 Super Bowls with the Raiders. And man, he was a special, special football player. Just like Al Davis says, just win, baby. And he played the defensive side of the ball just like that at a high level. You look at his overall skill level as an outside linebacker and DN, game changer, athletic. And one thing, remember this, as Mr. Harper LeBel just said, when he had them forearm pads on, I seen him deliver some shots. And he was back there when he got with the Raiders with the assassin. Think about you being a football player trying to break into the game, and you playing the Raiders one Sunday, and you playing your position, Hop, the tight end and wide receiver position, and you got to face a Raiders defense that's got Atkinson and Tatum on the backside. You got Hendricks on the outside. You got Mars, Mr. Otis Sistrunk. Man, that's some serious scaring going into your heart right there. I'm sorry. You're gonna be looking around out there on the field, baby. There's no question about it. Back to you, Hawk.
Yeah, their front four. You got Ted. You got Rod Martin. You mentioned him. You got Monty Johnson or Matt Millen. The secondary. Someone's going to hurt you. You may not. If you don't win the game, you're going to be hurting. And even if you do win, you're going to still be hurting. You're going to be bruised up. And those guys learn to protect themselves in a little bit different manner. But playing the Raiders, man, goodness, that was a rough road there back in the day. All right, let's look at when he joins the Raiders in 1975. He only started in 5 games, Vincent. He was on the bench, and they had other guys that were playing there, but he still had 27 tackles. He had 2 interceptions, 5 sacks, and he ends up getting a safety. So he makes a difference right away. When you put Ted Hendricks in, good things are going to happen. The 76 team, he had 57 tackles. He only had 1 interception that year. How about that? 6 sacks. He had another safety. They beat New England, then Pittsburgh, and then Minnesota. And that picture just to the right of middle on the top, they absolutely dominated the Minnesota Vikings. And Minnesota was known for offense. They had Fran Tarkenton. There's a picture of him tackling Chuck Foreman, Sammy White, very impressionable team. But the Raider defense were monsters that day. And even Al Davis said, "You are magnificent." The whole team, you are magnificent today. What a difference they were able to make. And fantastic year. In 77, they lose to Denver in the playoffs in the AFC Championship game. They missed the playoffs in 78. They were 9-7, and that's when John Madden retired. He ends up going to the booth. And in 79, that was the first year that Tom Flores comes in. And by the 80 year, 1 year later, they were 11-3. They beat Houston. They beat Cleveland. Then they beat San Diego. And then in the bottom middle, that's the picture of them with Ted Hendricks sitting on his helmet, as every Raider seemed to do back in those days. They win Super Bowl 15 against the Philadelphia Eagles. So now he's got 2 Super Bowl rings with the Raiders in just a couple of years and some great games. His legendary status is just kicking off like crazy, isn't it?
No question about it. Like I said, he won 3 Super Bowls with the Raiders. More impressive was the last one he won with that team with Marcus Allen, the great Jim Plunkett. But I think his influence with the Raiders, think about what the Raiders kind of carried as their culture. Think about Jim Plunkett coming over and playing with a Ted Hendricks, how his career kind of changed and he became a champion. Think about how Ted Hendricks was influenced on a young man that was a nose guy at the University of Oklahoma by the name of Reggie Kinlaw. Think about how he took a young Howie Long and made him a Pro Bowl player, made him a Hall of Famer, made Matt Millen a better player. But his culture, his personality was one, I'm going to play hard. I might play a little dirty, but the presence, the intimidation. This gentleman was 6'8" and on forearm pads, and he delivered blows after blows. Look at the image up there, how he handling Chuck Foreman. This guy, when we talk about pound for pound, height-wise, one of the toughest football players that played in this game. And he backs it up with 4 Super Bowl rings, baby. Just win with the Oakland Raiders. Out there in Northern California, Stephen Travers. Back to you, Hawk.
Yeah, that shot, when you think about great tacklers and intimidators, you think of Butkus, because when he'd get up, he'd point a bony finger at you. And
Right.
Jack Lambert would do the same thing. Even Mike Curtis would do stuff like that. Ted didn't necessarily have to point at you, but his reach with his ability, 9.5 feet from fingertip to fingertip, he had a lane. And smart guy. Howie Long said he's one of the smartest guys that I've ever been around. He would come in on a Monday morning. They'd watch film, and they would watch the previous game film, and then they would go through a tape of who they were going to be playing the next week, so to plant seeds for that. And Howie said, we could tell that Ted had been out the night before, and maybe there was a continuation of the hangover from where he had been. But they'd put film on of their next week's opponent, and Ted would sit, and he's half awake. He's kind of, thinking, but he would call out what the offense would be doing before the play was run. They're going to run a sweep here. This is going to be play action. They're going to pass. And Howie, as a young player, was so impressed with Ted's ability to know what the setting was, to know where the motion was going, and know what kind of play that they would be running out of that. Ted was a genius when it came to math and science, and he applied some of that over to his football career as well. Just had some amazing stories where he's riding a horse. There was a girl that was nearby where training camp was that was equestrian, and she had her horse. And Ted goes out the wrong end of the building, sees her, say, hey, can I borrow your horse for 15 minutes? And he just pulls a prank. And he put the smiley face on. He would talk to the camera in ways that a lot of players, he was so savvy and smart that sometimes he was bored. And, football doesn't always require a lot of thought, but he tried to do stuff to break the guys up. And you mentioned the Raiders. They were great, and it wasn't a lot, but every now and then they bring in a player from another team, like Ted Hendricks, like Jim Plunkett, like Lyle Alzado, and those guys helped continue that winning tradition that they had, and very quickly became part of the Raider family and had that history to go with them, and Ted certainly being a portion of that. Amazing career, Collegiate Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame. What can you say about Ted Hendricks?
My final words about one of the best football players that played on the defensive side of the ball at 6'8". It's just like he's from Miami, man. And people love traveling down to Miami, and they always mention Miami Vice. When I think about Ted Hendricks, I got to think about Phil Collins. Tonight, Mr. Hendricks. Back to you, Harp.
He wasn't always the leader in many ways, but he led in many different ways. What I mean is he had 61 sacks. He wasn't the leader, but he was always a competitive guy on your roster to go, yeah, I got 6 this year. 8.5 was the highest that he had in any one specific year, but he was a contributor in so many different ways. Before we go, I want to mention he holds the record for 25 block kicks. 25, and he played 15 years. So every year he's blocking one. In some cases, he's getting 2. And what I think he did is that he would line up as if it was just left of center. So if you're the kicker, if you're Nick Lowry, for example, with Kansas City, and you'd play them 2 times a year, and Nick knows that the wind is blowing a little bit from right to left, and so Ted lines up near the left post of center, the upright. But then when the ball snapped and everybody's got their head, Ted would move, and he'd go to the right portion of center, and that's where you're kicking the ball. And he helped win numerous games. There was one where late in the ball game, Raiders are ahead 21-20, a short field goal, and Kansas City is going to win this game. There's hardly any time on the clock. Nick Lowry is out there to win it, and Ted blocks the kick. He would make you think things and get you to miss. I don't know what the stat is on when you play the Raiders, what your kicking percentage was, but that was just one of many different areas where he was a difference maker in so many ways. But 4-time Super Bowl champion. He was first team All-Pro 4 times as well. He was the second team All-Pro twice. He went to the Pro Bowl 8 times in his 15 years career. He's a part of the 75th anniversary team for the NFL, the 100th anniversary team. He's in the All-70s and All-80s decade teams. He was the UPI Lineman of the Year back in 1968 in college. He was a unanimous All-American 2 times while he was there. And his number 89 was retired by the University of Miami. He is in the Pro Football and College Football Hall of Fame. And again, he's got 4 Super Bowl rings. He is one, Theodore Paul Hendricks. We wish him well. We appreciate all that he did for the National Football League, for college football, and to make the game a lot more fun to be a part of. So for Vincent Turner, for Jeremiah Long, our producer and engineer, I just want to say thank you for tuning in to another episode of our Legend Show here on 100 Yards of Football. Have a fantastic rest of your day, everybody.